Hey guys, Jocelyn here with Fantasia Elegance. In light of St. Patrick's Day being just around the corner, I thought today I would show you how to make this Celtic inspired ring with a little Triquetra or Trinity knot symbol on either side of it. As you can see, very pretty, and it's also very simple to make. It just uses one kind of wire. I will be using 20 gauge round dead soft wire. I'll be using bare copper from riogrande.com. You can use whatever you like as long as it is 20 gauge round soft wire. You'll also need a single bead to go in the center of our ring. I just like to use these 6mm round cat's eye glass beads. I do get these on Amazon, so I will leave a link in the description section below with where you can get these exact ones. I'll also leave links in the description section below for the exact tools and materials I'm using as always. You'll just need your standard round nose pliers, chain nose pliers, flush cutters, and a ring mandrel. I do recommend for this ring that you get a mandrel with a slot on the back so that you can sit the bead in there and get a more accurate band size for your ring without deforming because of having that bead on there. So I'm going to be making a size 7 ring, kind of an average ring size. For that I will be using one length of this 20 gauge wire. We'll want a piece that is 10 inches long. So I'm just going to get this straightened out in preparation for cutting here. I find that the 10-inch length makes a good size 7 to 8-ish range, and then if you want to make something a little larger, say size 9 to 10, you would want to cut an 11-inch piece, and of course you can size it down as well if you want to do that. So we've just got our nice straight length of wire here. I'm going to cut a 10-inch piece for our US size 7 ring. Just cut that off there, just the one piece of wire. Like I said, it's a very simple design. And first thing we're going to do is feed our bead onto this wire. And we want to just hold this right in the center of the wire. You can make a little mark with a sharpie and a ruler if you want right on the center. I'm just going to eyeball it. What we're going to start doing is kind of swirling the wire around the center bead, as you can see there. So to do that, I'm just going to take one end of it, holding the bead in place with my left hand. I'm going to use my right hand to start bending that wire up one way. And then where it's coming out of the bead going the other direction, we're going to bend that wire in the opposite direction so that we're getting something kind of like that. We're just going to continue this sort of spiraling motion around our bead. And at a certain point I do like to use my chain nose pliers just to push this down a little closer to the bead so that what we wind up with is kind of encasing the bead in a nice tight little spiral of wire. So I'm just squeezing on either side to close it up like that, so that we have something like that. And I'm just going to keep wrapping these ends around until they come full circle and meet the other side of the wire where it's coming out of the bead. And again, I'm just going to tighten that down a little bit with my chain nose pliers. And I hope there's not too much background noise on the recording today. We are having a huge windstorm here, so just bear with it if there is wind noise in the background. So what we want to do now is take both of these ends, and we want them to be coming in a straight line through the drilled hole of the bead. So I'm just going to use my chain nose pliers to take first one end and bend it right where that wire is exiting the bead. I'm going to bend it to come in a straight line from that point, just like that. And we'll do the exact same thing on the other side. So let me flip this over. Again, just bending the wire right at that point where the bead is drilled and taking it out in a straight line. So that we have something like that now. We've got our bead wrapped around in the wire and we've got both ends coming off in a straight line from each other. Now at this point we're going to pull out our ring mandrel and we're going to position on the ring. I find that I can wrap right on the size that I'm aiming for. I do recommend, if this is the first time you're making it, for one thing, use a little more wire than you think you'll need, and also be prepared that it might not wind up quite the size you want, just depending on how you particularly wrap rings. You might find that to get the ideal size that you're aiming for, you actually need to wrap it a half size to a whole size, larger or smaller on the ring mandrel. So just use cheap wire the first time you make it and see how it goes. But again, I'm aiming for a size 7, so I'm going to wrap right on the 7 line. I am going to go to the back of the ring mandrel so that I can slot my bead on here in that little slot that's grooved into the back. And I'm just going to start wrapping both of our tails around the mandrel like so. And I'm going to cross them over at the back so that they're running parallel with each other. Again, I'm wrapping right on that 7 line because that's the size that I'm aiming for. And I'm keeping things kind of tight and snug, keeping the tension on those ends as I go. I'm going to wrap them all the way around to the front until they almost come to the stone. And I'm just going to use my chain nose pliers to kind of push the stone and the wrapping around the stone down flat because that is starting to pop up a little bit as I was wrapping. So I'm just going to push that against the mandrel, make sure it's staying nice and flat for us. And again, just tugging on both of these tails to make sure that everything is staying nice and tight how I want it to be. Now at this point I'm going to make some marks on the wire, measuring out from the stone as our center point to know where we're going to make our first bend. You can just eyeball this, but I thought you might find it easier to follow along if I show you the exact measurements. So I'm just going to be using a regular old Sharpie and my metric side of the ruler here. And I'm just going to put a mark, again, taking that stone as our starting point that we're measuring from. I'm going to go out a little less than a centimeter, about 0.9 centimeters or 9 millimeters, and I'm just going to mark across both of our wires right there. Okay, and we'll do the same thing on the other side, and that's going to help us know where to make our first bend. Again, you can eyeball this as well. I just thought it would be easier for you to follow along doing the measurements here. And now at this point we can slide our ring mandrel off. Now that we have those little marks, we know where we want things to stay meeting up. If you find that it's drifted a little bit so your marks aren't in a line anymore, you might need to just close up your ring shape a little bit more. So I'll just do that little adjustment here, making sure that those marks are staying meeting up with each other. So now we're going to start forming our little Celtic knot symbol. What we're going to do is take the tail end here, and we're going to bend it out slightly from the center of our ring band, right where we made that little mark. So I'm just going to grip with my chain nose pliers, take that off at a slight little angle, right where we marked. We'll do the same thing on the other side. Again, right where we marked, just putting a little bit of an offset there, heading off at an angle. And now we're going to make our bend that will wind up being this left-sided point on our little knot that you can see there. So that's the bend we're going to put in now. And let me give you the measurement for that benchmark as well. Again, pulling out our metric ruler and a Sharpie. So for this mark, we're going to do a little bit longer. We're going to do just about 1.3 centimeters out. And I'm measuring from our previous mark that we made right there. So that is where I'm placing the 0 of the ruler, and we're going to go 1.3 centimeters out from there and just put a little mark in. I'll go ahead and mark on the other side as well. Same thing, measuring from that first little Sharpie mark that we have, just about 1.3 centimeters out. What we want to do now is use that mark as an exact center point for putting in a very tight U-shaped bend in the wire. So I'm going to grip slightly below our mark and just start pushing this tail on around, going all the way around. And I'm going to start crimping this down, again keeping that mark as the center point of a really tight U-shaped bend that we're going to put in. So just like that, and I'm going to squeeze this all the way down, putting in a very tight little crimp in the wire, just like that. Again, with our Sharpie mark being on the center. I'm going to work my thumb in there, spread this apart slightly, and open it back up with my round nose pliers. So just opening this back up a little bit. Alright, and then we can start putting our little curves in. So I'm going to curve this first one way. And you might even find it easier to use your chain nose pliers if you need to. What I'm looking for is to put a curve going over the center line of our ring band here. So this little point that we've just made sit slightly to the left of our stone, just like that. So let's do the same thing on the other side. Again, right where we made that mark, we're going to put our bend in, keeping the mark centered right where our bend is going to happen. Nice and tight there. And we'll spread those wires back out a little bit, opening it up ever so slightly with just the tips of our round nose pliers, and then swooping this wire on around so that that point we just made can sit just a little bit to the left of our stone. Alright, so now we're going to measure one more time to know where to put our final sharp little crimp in. This one we're going to measure out a little bit further. We're going to do 1.5 centimeters. So again, we're measuring right from that point we just formed. We're going to go out about 1.5 centimeters. Okay, and I'll do that on both sides as before. Just a little mark there. If you have a ultra fine point Sharpie, that works a little better, but mine has run out of ink, unfortunately. And same thing as before, we're just going to bend this around a little bit, bending it towards the stone, and then we're going to put in another of those very tight little crimp bends right at that point we have there, and smushing it on down with our chain nose pliers to get a nice tight little bend. We'll open it back up slightly, use our round nose pliers to put a little more space in there, just spread it apart a little bit. And then we'll just work on positioning these points where we want them to be. You want either point to be kind of centered on either side of the stone. So as you can see, we need to work these to the left a little bit. So I'll just start bending that one that direction. We'll put a little bit more of a bend in here. And we are looking for this to wind up being more symmetrical as well. So that we have something kind of like that. At this point you can rub off those marks we made earlier. You can just use any little piece of dampened cloth or fabric that you have. It should take those marks right off. If you do find they're being stubborn and not wanting to rub off, you could use a little bit of alcohol on a paper towel. That should take them right off for you. Alright, so you can see we've formed two of the kind of petals or sides of our Triquetra knot. So we're just going to make our final little arch shape, wrapping this tail around and a little swoop back over the center of the band to form our final third part of the shape. As you can see, right where this tail is crossing over the center of the band, that's where we need to close this off to finish up our shape. And what we've done here is just wrap it around both of our band wires. So let's go ahead and do that. First thing I'm going to do is grip right at that point where it crosses over the band. I'm just going to bend it off at right angles with the band, just like that. And then I'm going to grip using one pair of chain nose pliers right where it crosses over the band. I'm just going to hold it there. Swap hands. I'm going to use a second pair of chain nose pliers to just feed this tail down through the ring band and wrap it back up and around, and then we will push everything down nice and tight on itself, and we're going to wrap another 2 times so that we have 3 wraps total, going very tightly around the ring band. And with each wrap I'm just going to push it down using my chain nose pliers just to make sure everything is staying nice and tight there. Okay, so there's 2 wraps. Let's do the third one. There we go. And after our third wrap on the top, I'm just going to switch over to my flush cutters, trim that off pretty close to the band, trim off our excess wire, and then use my chain nose pliers to push that end down against the band so that there's no sharp, scratchy bit sticking off. Alright, so let's go ahead and finish the other side. We're going to do it the same way, and it has shifted a little bit so that those little marks aren't meeting up anymore on the ring band. So I'm just going to use my chain nose pliers to put a little bit more of a bend in on the band just to make sure that everything's meeting up where I want it to. And as you can see, we've got our mark there for the second bend. Before we put that in, let's just start swooping this wire around a little bit first. There we go. We'll put our second really sharp crimp point in here. Again, placing that little Sharpie mark that we have right on the center tip of where we're making our bend. We'll tighten it on down, and then we'll spread it back open just a little bit using our round nose pliers. Just spreading that apart again and forming our little shape how we want it to sit. And at this point I am referencing as well how it looks in relation to the shape we've already formed, because we do want it to be symmetrical. So just bear that in mind as you're forming this second little triquetra knot on the other side. So I'm just referencing as I go that things are going to sit more or less symmetrically how I want them to. Alright, so once you're happy with the shape, same thing as before, we're just going to wrap our remaining tail around both of our band wires right at that point where it crosses over them. So again, I'm just going to bend it up at 90-degree angle to our band wires, just like that. I'm going to grip with one set of chain nose pliers right where I want the wrap to sit, and then I'm going to use the other set to feed that tail down through the ring band, bring it up and around, and then we will tighten down using again our chain nose pliers just to tighten down where that is sitting. Okay, and we'll put a good 2 or 3 wraps in here, making sure it's sitting really snug to hold our band together. And then once you've got your 3 wraps in, we can use our flush cutters to trim off very close to the band and just push. I might take a little more off even. And just push that end on down nice and tight against the band. And don't forget to check with your fingers that it is not sharp or scratchy. So there we go. That is our little double triquetra knot easy wire wrapped ring. Now if you want to, and for a little added stability, depending on how hard you are on your rings, you can take some 28 gauge wire and wrap it right over this point, right at the overlapping of our little knot, and go all the way around the ring band, and just wrap that several times just to add a little more stability so that these little knots can't move around as much. But it does work either way. That is an optional step. Again, if you want to do that, I just used maybe a 2-inch piece of some 28 gauge round wire to make those little wraps right there. But this is a very fun style. It's pretty in all different colors. I've just done a bunch of different shades of green here in honor of St. Patrick's Day, but you can use whatever stone type you like, whatever wire type you like. This does also look very pretty in the copper if you go ahead and antique it with liver of sulfur. I do have a tutorial for how to do that on my channel, so check that out if you're not familiar and if you're curious about that. But yeah, I really hope you guys enjoyed this quick and simple tutorial, found it helpful and easy to follow. If you did, please leave me a like and consider subscribing so that you are notified of new videos that I post. I do have lots more planned. I'm also always open, feel free to comment below if you have an idea for a tutorial that you might like to see. But thank you guys so very much for watching. Hope you are staying safe and well, and that you have a very happy St. Patrick's Day. I'll catch you in the next video. Happy crafting!